Hi there, welcome to Trey's Talks to Grow, your leadership and management equipping resource. Today, I want to talk to you about modeling the behavior that you expect from other people. You know, in so many instances, it seems like, we go out and we have all these rules and these policies and these things that we want to get done, and oftentimes we're not very sensitive to what we're actually modeling in front of other people. And we're going to use the word model to kind of talk about some different components of what we should be modeling to other people. I was doing a training event once with a fast food organization, and you would certainly know who they are. They're a big group. And I remember the regional vice president standing in front of all of these managers. And man, she was so upset with them over some customer satisfaction scores or something like that. And it kind of crossed the line to where she was almost berating them and just really coming down on them. And when she was done with her speech, all I can remember when she got finished really just kind of tearing them apart was, now go out there and be nice to people. And I just thought it was such an interesting dynamic for this regional vice president to rip her people to shreds and then in the very next breath say, now go be nice to people. But it's interesting, you have to ask yourself, how often do we do things like that? How often do we say one thing, yet we very well may be modeling something else? So let's take a look at the word model and break it apart and think about what we're modeling in front of the people that we lead and the people that we manage. The first letter of model is M, right? So we're going to talk about, are we modeling the mission of our organization or of our team? Okay, are we modeling the mission of our organization or team? Now, there's a big difference between the mission that's written on the wall and what's actually being practiced down the hall. Okay, you really got to get into this to see what's going on inside of your place. Anybody can write a nice statement up and hang it up on the wall, but what's really happening inside of the organization? Once again, I was at my favorite coffee shop. I won't go into anything by name, but if I were to call them, you'd know who they are. And I'm a regular in there all the time, and I'd ordered my drink, and I was sitting there waiting. And, their goal is customer service and making sure your drink is right and making sure that everything is friendly and perfect inside. And as I was waiting for my drink, and I was in a little bit of a hurry, I had to get somewhere. As I was waiting for my drink, there was a shift supervisor and there was an employee, and they were literally having an argument right in front of me over how something was made or how something was done. And here's what it boiled down to. Basically, the employee was trying to do something to satisfy the customer, to make them happy. And the shift supervisor was going to be held accountable for a discrepancy in inventory evidently between what gets wrung out and how it gets processed. And so they were fussing about how to do something. And, right there in front of me, it hit me. They had competing visions, right? They had competing things going on. The mission from one person was very different from the mission of the other. So you got to make sure that your people understand what the overall mission is. And I actually had to interrupt them and stop them. I said, hey, look, everybody out here can hear everything that's going on back there. And that's not a really good thing. So they apologized and finished up my drink. But are you modeling the mission of your organization? Do you know what the mission of your organization and your team is? And you got to make sure that you're modeling that behavior consistently in front of people all the time. The next part of this is obedience, okay? Are you obedient? Are you loyal? And, it's really interesting, and I can think back to my younger days in leadership when I would make this mistake. Sometimes, you have this malicious compliance going on where the home office or the person above you may say, here's what we need to do. And you get in front of your people and you say, hey, we've got to go in this direction or we've got to accomplish this task. And I don't know why we're doing it. Or, boy, those people up there in the corporate office, they must be crazy. I don't know what they're smoking, right? We say things and we comply, but it's this malicious compliance. And let me just tell you, if you're doing that, if you're modeling that, then whenever you ask your people to do something, you're giving them permission to do the exact same thing to you. So you got to make sure that you're modeling obedience. And here's the other thing that's beautiful about obedience. Public loyalty gets you private leverage. If you're obedient in public to the organization that you're a part of, when you may not agree with something, chances are when you go in to talk to your supervisor about it or whatever, you're going to have leverage with them privately because they know that you support them publicly. And that's the proper way to make the kind of change with things that you may not necessarily agree with. It also gives you greater leverage and greater influence with your people. So make sure you know the mission. Make sure you're being obedient. Next point, decisiveness, being decisive. Now, obviously not making the wrong decisions, right? But people follow someone who makes the wise choices. So are you being decisive in the right ways? People gravitate towards people who make the wise choices. And chances are, if you know the mission of your organization and you're being obedient, that allows you to make the wise choice. So make sure you're modeling being decisive and making the wise choice. Next point, ethos. Now, this is not necessarily something that you model directly, but it is a direct result of what you're modeling. Ethos is this great word, and it means spontaneous, reoccurring patterns. Okay, I'm going to say that again. Spontaneous, reoccurring patterns. The best way I know to illustrate this is through a story, once again, through my younger leadership days in retail. I worked for this one organization that was crazy about how clean the floors were. I mean, they had to be perfect. They had to be spotless. And I don't know if you've ever been in a retail store before and you notice or you look down on the floors, you can see these little black squeegee marks sometimes get on the clean tiles. Well, I would go around and I would squeegee them up with my foot. Literally, you'd put your toe down on it and you'd squiggle your foot back and forth, and the little mark would come up. To this day, I can't walk through any retail store if I see a little mark, like I have to stop and get it up with my foot. But nonetheless, back in my younger leadership days, as I'm doing this throughout my store, it wasn't long before I looked around me, and guess what all my employees were doing? They were doing the exact same thing. They were getting up all those little marks on the floor. Now, here's the interesting thing. I never had a meeting. I never did special training. I never called everyone together and said, here's exactly how you need to do this, and I expect you all to do this. Yet they all started doing it. It became a spontaneous, reoccurring pattern. It was the ethos that I created, and it was all created by what I was modeling. Think about what's going on around you all the time. Is it always calm? Is it always chaotic? Is it always tension, or is it always traction? Is there always clarity, or is there always uncertainty? I don't know. You have to answer those questions for yourself, but chances are it's an ethos that you're modeling. It's a spontaneous, reoccurring pattern that you are creating. So make sure you realize those different things that you're doing in an organization, because what you're doing has a tremendous impact in what you're modeling in front of your people. The next point, this one's going to sound a little strange, okay? So kind of get ready. I'm warning you right now. It's likability. Now, you may be thinking, well, wait a minute, now everyone's not going to like me, and that's absolutely true. But I'm not saying that you've got to make everyone happy and that you've got to be loved and liked by everyone. But there is something to being likable, to being a likable person. Tim Sanders writes a couple of great books, and by the way, I encourage you to pick either of these up. They're a great resource. One of them is called Love is the Killer App. Fantastic book, and I know love is not a word that we use in corporate America very often, but he's got a great application for it. And the second book he wrote was called The Likability Factor. But in both of those books, he demonstrates and models and talks about how people, leaders and managers who are likable become more trustworthy. They tend to operate with integrity. They're folks that get things done. So don't be afraid of showing sincere appreciation and care for the people around you. I always appreciate leaders who care about their people. And it doesn't mean that they're soft either. They can be some of the toughest people around. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that they're not likable. I had the great opportunity to meet Sam Walton on a couple of occasions. And for those of you who maybe don't know, he was the founder of Walmart, one of the largest companies in the world now. And I remember the first time I met him, he came in a store that I was in, a Sam's Club, and he put his arm around me as we were walking up to the front, and he said, are you taking care of your customers? And I said, yes, sir. And then his next question he said was, are you taking care of your employees, your associates, your people? And I said, yes, sir. He said, it's pretty simple, isn't it? You take care of your employees, and they'll take care of the customers. And I said, yes, sir. But he was so passionate about people. He was a likable guy and probably one of the most impactful leaders of quite some time. So make sure that you're likable. So let's recap the whole model thing to make sure we're modeling the proper behavior in front of people. First of all, make sure we know the mission. Second, make sure we're being obedient, that we're being loyal. Third, being decisive, making the wise choice. Next, ethos, those spontaneous recurring patterns that are going on around us. And then last, but certainly not least, to make sure that we're likable. Remember, discussion determines development. And it's in the conversation that we get the revelation of the person that we can become, and also we can help others get the revelation of who they can become at work. I hope that this talk has helped you, and in turn, you get to help someone else.